Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Select Board Roundtable. We have made a commitment to try to do these more regularly, and now this is our second show, so it's almost a streak. I am joined by John Samia, Michelle Conlon, and our chair, Mo DiPaolo, and unfortunately, Teresa Flynn was unable to join us tonight. We also said that it doesn't always have to be all five of us, so that might keep people tuning in because you never know what combination of select board members will be present to talk about any given topic. Today we're going to talk about ARPA. That's the American Rescue Plan Act funding. We have been working for many months now on how to best spend and allocate the latest amount that we have. And it's a lot of work that's been done at the department level and also by our board and workshops. To really try to crystallize where we wanted to direct these funds. And we were very clear that we wanted to make sure they were things that people could touch and feel, things that would have an impact on the taxpayer or the ratepayer so that it would reduce some of the burden that people are feeling. And then that also kind of things that we have always wanted to get to, but we would never get to without this opportunity. So there's going to be a public forum on this at the library on December 13th, where there will be information available and a short presentation made about the different buckets that we sort of categorize the money into and some of the specifics around the projects that will be funded. And again, we want that feedback from the community and an opportunity for people to let us know what they think and are we on the right track. I think we really benefited from this lining up with our strategic planning process. And so we had a lot of opportunities for feedback from the community so we know that this is on the right track and it lines up with what people are looking for as far as improvements in the town and where they want to see resources allocated. So I thought we could just talk about some of the projects that are impactful from our perspective. And I know that many of us advocated for different things throughout the process. So just jump in.
Yeah, before we get there, just I think is a brief summary of how we got here. So we received $11.5 million under ARPA. We spent about $3.8 million last November. As a board, we had approved many projects, some to give some relief on the levy. Public health related, mental health was a big area that we had talked about, and also for negative economic consequences, grants for small business grants and the like. And that was about $3.8 million. Some of those dollars have been spent. They continue to be spent. And as you had mentioned, Beth, over the last, many months, it's the approximately $7.6 million remaining of the $11.5 million that there have been a lot of thoughtful discussions on to try to how best touch all members of the community, broad-based approach to really focus where we learned a lot, as you mentioned, in terms of public feedback, in terms of passive recreation was an area. Quality of life is definitely the largest bucket that we spent a lot of time on based on feedback that we received from residents, but also looking at it, not only how many people can touch it, they can see it, they can feel it, but those projects that we always should have done, that we haven't been able to do for many reasons, they're well documented what those reasons are, but everything as we've gone through this process and the discussions, they're all things that we should do. They're all things that what we're trying to maximize the impact and benefit for all of our community, and those are the discussions we've had.
And I think part of the reason that it seems like we've been a little slow on the uptake is because when the rules for the ARPA funds came out, excuse me, federal government had basically 4 buckets, and it was pretty restrictive. The loosest one was if you want to use it for water and sewer, you could use the whole thing for water and sewer. But beyond that, had to be very specific in categories, and they didn't fit. And so the federal government decided a little bit into the process that you could use it for almost anything, except you couldn't use it to offset your tax rates, because they wanted the money to be invested and used, and not just to be used to lower people's taxes, and really you get no extra benefit out of it. And it was supposed to be a stimulus. It was supposed to be something to enhance people's lives, not to just lower the taxes, have a one shot at that, and be done with it. So it did take a while for us to be able to figure out exactly what we could do with it. But I think once we figured out what we could do with it, I think we came up with a pretty good plan.
Yeah, it's a good point that when we first embarked on this, the lost revenue category was far and away the smallest. So I think it was about $1 million of the $11+ million, and then the regulations came out, and then the first $10 million of any stimulus funds that we received were unencumbered. So waited a while for the regulations to come out. Didn't want to run afoul. This is all subject to audit. Could be subject to clawbacks. We wanted to make sure we had it right. And as Beth, you mentioned, as part of the strategic planning process, got a lot of public feedback and to incorporate that, and that was very important. And we wanted to make sure that this is very thoughtful, but as broad-based as possible.
Right. So who wants to go next?
What are different areas that we talked about?
So some of the one of the biggest things that we heard from residents and through our surveys and all of our public input sessions that we had was the need for parks improvements and outdoor space, outdoor recreation, and accessibility within all of those pieces. So that was one of the areas that we focused on. We have spoken with the Parks and Rec Department, the different departments that are involved, Public Works and the board, the Parks
Commission.
Parks Commission, thank you. And identified some areas where we can make some really fun and really exciting changes with our parks that I think really will touch sort of all age groups in our community. So I'm looking forward to that. There's some ADA accessibility issues we're looking at Edgemere. There's some playgrounds and pickleball courts at Lake Street. There's pickleball court improvements and parking at Coolidge, parking and roadway improvements at the Maple Ave fields. So we've sort of spread it out throughout the town, made sure that it's not concentrated in any one park that we have in the community, but really looking town-wide at where we have needs and what we can do that would touch every age group in our community. So I'm excited about that.
And one of the things we tried to do was, well, not we tried to, we were pretty insistent that the investments that we were making were not going to be investments that were going to require ongoing investment operating costs, because that, if we weren't careful, that could cause problems down the road. It's like, we built it, now how are we going to operate it? So these were things that were more infrastructure type capital improvements, like the playground, like the pickleball courts. Yeah, there might be some maintenance down the road of painting them or painting the courts or something like that. But basically, once they're up and running, they should be maintenance free for the most part for several years. But also these things in the playgrounds in particular, and the parks in general. We wanted something that was going to touch people, that they could actually see where the money went and could help with their quality of life. Because after COVID, people wanted to get out. And everybody realizes we have a great park in Dean Park, and we haven't had the money over 20 years since we bought Lake Street. We really haven't had the money to invest in any of these parks in any big way. And now we have the opportunity. And so with what we've heard over the years and all the studies, the open space plan and the strategic plan, everything was about doing stuff for outdoor recreation. And so this gave us the opportunity to spread it out and maybe take some of the pressure off of Dean Park and get people to realize that we have other facilities around town that could be used, and maybe it'll get some interest in it, and maybe now we're going to be able to build on those things incrementally and have some big recreation areas besides Dean, which will help take some of the pressure off of that, and maybe the maintenance requirements, they won't be as demanding as they are now. So I think it's exciting. I think people are gonna be happy with what they see.
And the other interesting thing too is this is an opportunity to implement some of those needs that were looked at as the Parks Improvement Plan. Municipal fields were also included. That wasn't part of this, but in terms of Maple Ave, Dean Park, there's been a lot of thoughtfulness that's gone into planning over this last several years, but the hard part has been being able to implement anything. That's part of that's exciting about this. Mo, you had talked about taking the pressure off Dean Park. I think that's important, but at the same time, we've heard a lot about lack of open space, or the concern in the community that there's not a lot of open space. But this is an opportunity to display the fact that we do. If you look at Maple Ave, it's 20 acres of open space over there. Municipal field, which we really hadn't talked about a lot, but that's in itself, the fields are 5 acres themselves. Dean Park is 79 acres. This is a chance to showcase what the community has and improve it, so that various areas of the community can go either to their park or they can go to another park, and there's going to be amenities available. So if they're at the ball fields at Lake Street, or they're watching their kids, their younger kids will have things to do and also have ability to be entertained and exercise. And it is an exciting time for the community, and we hope that the enthusiasm is permeating through the screen. But there's just a lot of good things as we talk through, and we think that will benefit the community at large.
Right. We had a big study in 2018. This won't address all the issues, but it's a start.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked parks and we asked the Parks Commission, it's like, we can't do everything, but we have a pot of money. What do you think will be the most impactful? And we didn't tell them what to do. We just said, we have the money, do what you think will be the most impactful. And they came back with some recommendations that I think they're pretty good. And 5 years ago, who would have known that pickleball would have been like one of the main things?
Right. I think people are going to be thrilled to hear that there's actually going to be, like, there's a plan for pickleball courts,
Right.
making that happen. And
Yeah.
you know, we also heard from the Parks Commission and from DPW that they're looking to couple CPA funds, go down the road
Right.
with, you know, some of the projects that they get started here.
Right, and this all might not happen in next year. It might take 2 years to get this done.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it will be a start. And it was very encouraging that, we just have completed a study. And as a matter of fact, I think the organization that did the ADA study for us, the accessibility study, is coming in one of the meetings in December to review it with us. That parks actually took into consideration accessibility. And one of the things in Edgemere, and that's going to be a little bit delayed because that's like a multi-year funding for that project. But one of the big facets of that was accessibility for people. So I found that very encouraging that's built into the thought process now. That people want it, it fits into the whole DEI thing. That's part of it, and so I think that's good, and I think that's going to make a lot of people happy. Also, that's going to be part of what we do as we go forward. So I think it's exciting. I'm excited to see what the public thinks.
Yeah, in addition to the parks, we've got a lot of other areas too that really we believe will improve quality of life that we looked at in terms of potential programs that can alleviate or could fund or provide assistance to residents over the next couple of years, given that the funds have to be encumbered by 24, right, and spent by 26. So this isn't an endless pot, but it's a thoughtful way to provide assistance over several years. But there are other things in quality of life that we had talked about as well, and economic development. That we should talk about too.
Well, I think, but you hit the big one. I think one of the big ones that we were all interested in was food insecurity, particularly with the cost of food going up. I went to the market today and just picked up a few things and a couple of little carry bags, and it was $64, and I just kind of laughed. I couldn't believe it. It was like, really? Are you kidding me? So I can imagine with people that are on a tight budget and how they have to stretch their dollars, it's real with inflation. So between food insecurity and we'll call it utility insecurity, between electricity, which is going up because of the price of gas and oil and the price of heat, and some real estate tax relief. Part of this plan over the next 3 years includes up to $425,000 for income eligible families, individuals, to help them in those areas, which I think is going to be enormously helpful to people, not just seniors, but there are going to be a lot of people impacted by this. And if we have a bad winter, I think, Beth, you attended
Did. I was going to bring that up, the home heating group meeting, and that's a group of stakeholders that get together, like our social service organizations and also police and fire, and they get together to sort of talk about what are the safety nets for people in the community. And there's a booklet that's put together every year that's available at the town hall, at the senior center, at the library, that gives those resources and how to access them. And one of the conversations was the funding available for assistance for fuel when people run out of oil, for example, was really starting to dwindle. And with the price right now, that was really going to impact how many people were going to be able to be provided with assistance this winter. And so this amount of money will bolster and allow people to have that safety net in place if they are struggling. So again, if people are watching this and they find themselves struggling to pay heating bills, they should get in touch with, if you're a senior, maybe someone at the senior center, can always reach out to the town manager's office, select board office, and be directed to the right people, because there are funds available.
Right, and the important thing about this is we're not coming up with new criteria. If you're available for fuel assistance now, you'll be available through SMOC and those other programs.
Through SMOC,
or you're eligible through the programs that Selco have. You don't have, you're eligible. We're not making up new rules. So once we finalize everything before the end of the year, people will be able to apply, and the rules will already be in place. So it's important, because if we have a cold winter, it's going to matter. It's going to matter a lot. One
of the things that Al from Al's Oil, they're the partners that fill the oil tanks on an emergency basis. He mentioned that people let it go too long, right? And then you never want your oil tank to be completely empty, because then there's that whole process of having to prime it. So people who are watching this, call and get that help before it becomes another problem on top of just not having oil.
And also the need-based tax relief program, that's consistent with what the warrant articles back in May at the annual town meeting to provide tax relief, understanding that affordability can be a challenge, and that was to provide additional funding to one of the warrant articles that was sort of like share the warmth, or to check the box if you want to provide funds for that. And that's something that we're mindful of, and to Mo's point, that Target used to be the $100 store. It's no longer. If you go there, even basic amenities, it's far more than that. The $200 store now, and that's for not a lot. And we know that it's tough out there. And to 75 gallons or 100 gallons at $5+ a gallon adds up really quickly, and a lot of hard decisions have to be made for residents. And to the extent we can make it easier, that's what we hope to do. We know that this can provide some help, and that's what we're trying to do in multiple areas, but we know that we're trying to allocate all of these resources in many areas, and this is an important one. We wish we could do more, but at the same time, it's trying to allocate over all the different areas.
Right. And if I might just add, last year we did allocate money for mental health services through Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services,
$625,000 or $650,000
over a few years. We already did that because we recognized that need was immediate. So for people watching and didn't hear us mention it, we already did do that.
Right, that was in the first.
Right, we jumped on that right away. So
first amount of money that was spent.
We did do that, and we know that actually there were capacity problems there. Not as much. We could throw more money at it, but there's physical capacity problems there also, and human resource problems there, because it's hard to get staff.
Correct.
But anyways, we tried to cover all of it, and there were some other areas, John, that I think, and Beth, that we haven't covered yet that are also on that list.
Yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the infrastructure improvements that will reduce the burden on taxpayers as far as upgrades and updates that need to be done to our, I think it's our sewer. Yeah. So.
Not sexy, but
no,
needed.
But needed, and everyone likes when they don't have to see things.
When you
don't
have to see or think about it.
Right, we all want.
It's a good thing.
We all want the toilets to flush.
Yeah.
So these are important things, and I know that we talked about the Walnut Street. Is it the sewer pump station there? And it's some kind of valve. Someone must have it.
There's the sewer main upgrades. There's an undersized sewer main there, and then there's the sewer pump station upgrades.
Right.
So I don't have the details in front of me, but it's to prevent any sanitary sewer
capacity
overflows.
issues there, and it turned out when they were doing the study that because the sewer line was built in the 70s and there's been development there that they probably couldn't predict back in the 70s, they found out that the sewer line is too small. It needs to be done, and it's a tremendous amount of money that the cost once COVID started just skyrocketed. So that's something you won't see except for the disruption up on the surface when they're digging on it, but it's absolutely necessary. And if it wasn't for the ARPA money, and it's over $1 million.
Yep.
$1.5 million.
That we put in it. It would have had to come out of rates, and it probably would have forced a rate increase, which we're going to need in a year or two anyways, just because of increasing costs because of just the nature of the operation. But it would have been much larger. So it's one of those things where you'd rather put it in something else, but you got to have the system run.
Yeah.
And this isn't because of any new development or potential development. It's existing right now with what we have currently. We're seeing sanitary sewer overflow from this Walnut Street. And I think Clue Street was the other pump station that was mentioned as needing some upgrades.
Right. And we were hoping that some of the new development would see contributions from the developers, which we will, but it turned out to be a bigger issue than we thought it was. So it's fortunate that this did come along when it did. But it's not a majority of the money, it's a portion of the money, and we still are getting to do a lot of this other stuff that we had hoped we'd be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important point. This isn't going to pay the bill for the full amount of the upgrades, but it provides a meaningful contribution to it, providing some relief for ratepayers, similar to our approach for all of this, to try to provide various meaningful ways to be able to spend the ARPA dollars in a non-recurring way with the most impact. And that's the balancing act as we've gone through all of this, taking the communication of the thoughts from residents, but also the expertise from our department heads and our staff to figure out the best way to provide that meaningful, enriching opportunities for our residents. And sewer upgrades aren't the sexiest thing in the world, but let's be honest, you have to do it. You need water, you need sewer, you need the basic utilities to be able to thrive as a community. And this was another important area that, honestly, Mo, as you said at the introduction, we could have spent it all for sewer upgrades. Yeah. But I don't think that's the thing that people want to touch.
Wouldn't have been enough.
Well, when you have a system that was started in the very late 50s, early 60s, and some of the big pump stations were built back then, had some rehabs. The life cycle is there. Some of that stuff needs to be done.
Right.
We also have some items in public safety,
Public
right?
safety.
We do.
Yeah.
We have quite a few.
So there were some requests for permanent traffic radars, ASHA training for the police department, a drone, a lake patrol jet ski, the SCBA compressor for the fire department, which is the machine that fills our oxygen tanks. There were school safety and security enhancements, radio systems for school building upgrades. I think there was even some funding for firefighters on the list. So, so it's good. We actually were able to allocate funding from this for all of the requests that were made from our police and fire departments. So that's really exciting.
That was one of the areas the firemen that would be a reoccurring cost, but we had already committed to that in our budget projections, and we're hoping we're going to get funding for the next 3 years from the federal government, but we may not. So we wanted to make sure we allocated the money because we do need a third person in the what do we call it? I want to call it
Station
the Edgemere.
3.
I was going to call it the Edgemere Station,
Yeah.
to replace the Edgemere Station down on the Centex Station.
Yeah.
We do need someone there. We've been holding off for a couple years, and if we don't get the federal money, this will help us get started, and we won't have to depend on the operating budget for a couple of years. So it was in the plan, made more sense to take it out of here and hold off a little bit, but, yeah, we were able to do some good stuff there. The jet ski might sound like a nice to have, but anybody who lives on the lake or boats on the lake will tell you that it is not. It's like our boat that we have on the lake. The summers can get quite hectic out
There's been a lot of improvements made with enforcement of proper boating etiquette on the lake, and I know that this will be very helpful. And like you said, we wanted to make sure we touched all areas of the community, and when we talk about improving our parks, well, we also need to think about improving and making sure that our lake is well managed.
Right. And I think if you step back and look at it, we tried to hit the broadest segments of the population that we could, and still address the parts of the population that needed help. Lake people are going to have problems with food and heat. The lake doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is, and it's a big safety issue. There's issues there every summer. They've been there for 20 years at least. So we tried to be broad. They're not going to be everything that everybody would want, but it's a great start. And we tried to affect as many areas as we could with the amount of money that we have. Sounds like a lot of money, but when you start these projects, it doesn't go as far as you think.
Yeah. So we have about 2 minutes left before we wrap up. Let's just plug the forum a little bit that we're going to be having on December 13th at the library in the evening. And we're setting it up so that there's a presentation, but then stations around the room where there will be someone there available to talk to people about the different funding buckets and the different projects to sort of get reactions. And then maybe there's something we haven't thought of, and we do have money set aside for that as well, if there's something that comes from the public.
Yeah.
How I envision this as anyone who went in November and December of 2019 as the town center zoning was coming to play, and looking at what the bylaw would be like when economic development went in there and made presentations, and you had stations that you could ask questions. That is part of the idea how I envision this, just an understanding as to what the vision is, where it came from, ask questions, and hopefully feel the same excitement, make suggestions, absolutely, and hopefully feel the same excitement that we have with all of these opportunities. When you think about our strategic plan, we want to create a community in which all can thrive, and I think every one of these strategic investments in our community furthers that statement.
Yeah. So we hope to see a lot of people that night.
Yep. December 13th, right?
Do you know the time? Is it 6:30 or 7?
I think we said, I think it was 6:30 was the
6:30?
time that
I keep
was.
dancing around it because I'm not really sure. So 6:30 now, we'll make it 6:30.
Check the website. Check the website.
We'll make it 6:30, and that way people are able to plan. But we really do hope to get feedback. And if you're not able to attend,
And don't forget the Yuletide, December 3rd.
That's good. Yeah, that's right.
5 o'clock. Or is it 4 o'clock? I always mix
I think
that
it's
one.
4 o'clock.
I always mix that one up. 4 to 8, yes.
All right, don't
I should
tune
never
into us
advertise
for
that
times.
function. Should never advertise that.
Not
I
for
always
social
get it wrong.
calendars, don't look to us.
All right, well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Select Board Roundtable, and we hope to see many of you on December 13th.